We're all imperfect, and on this podcast, I'll be chatting with a variety of interesting people who are willing to make themselves vulnerable by sharing their own struggles and imperfections.
It got to a point when I was really broken, when I was really unwell, and I'd walked away from telly. I didn't really care if I lived or died. Yeah.
I'm Hugh Van Kylenberg from the Resilience Project.
And I'm Ryan Shelton from my mum.
And I'm Josh from Hugh's mum.
And this is The Imperfects.
Hi everyone, my name's Hugh Van Kylenberg from the Imperfects podcast. I'm your co-host, joined here by Josh Van Kylenberg and Ryan Shelton. Welcome, gentlemen.
What was that?
What are you doing?
Well, I've done 7 weeks of live talkback radio, and I've enjoyed my introductions I did on the radio and thought, why don't I do them here?
It sounded very professional. And how would you continue?
Oh, that's it.
Then you just go to a caller.
Yeah, what do I say next? No, then I'd introduce the topic, and I would have written it spent hours writing it the night before at some kind of introduction. I realised I don't do that for the podcast, but did that sound okay?
It sounded really good.
Thank you.
It doesn't sound like you. It definitely sounds like Hugh, the radio guy.
Do you know, on my first show, what I didn't realise was, the news comes in at a certain point. After my show's finished, the news will come in at 10 o'clock. And it comes in at that time no matter what. So if I'm talking, it just crashes in over the top of me, and I didn't know that until just before the show started. And make sure you're out at that time because the news starts. And
and the ABC are very specific about on the second.
And I said, well, can we just wait till I'm finished? And then I went, no, that's when it comes in.
Yeah.
So I was panicking a little bit, and I had all these notes in front of me of things I had to say in the last minute, like little dot points of the show that's coming up next, when the news is going to be, when I'll be back, who's filling in on all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going through it all, and with about 30 seconds to go, maybe 40 seconds to go, Hayley, the wonderful producer, she could talk to me through the headphones or whatever, and she goes, so the show coming up afterwards that I had to forward promote was called Stop Everything, and with about 40 seconds to go, she goes, Hugh, stop everything. And I went, oh. And I just put my hands up and just froze completely. I was like, so I thought she was saying, just stop talking completely.
Which is an interesting direction for radio. Stop everything.
I thought something had gone wrong, or the news had come in early or something. So I was like, something's happening, I'll just stop. And so it was this literally radio silence. So I had my hands in the air going, I'm not moving. I don't know what's happening here.
The show after Stop Everything is, okay, keep talking. Very confusing. This is, we don't really want to spend time chit-chatting at the top here because we really want to get to Grant Denyer. This chat is really everything we could have hoped this podcast would be when we first started.
When we first started.
When we first started, yeah, exactly. I mean, this episode for sure. But as generally when when Hugh and I were talking about doing a podcast at the very start and thinking it's about people who seem like they've got it all and they come on and they explain what their life's really like behind the scenes and the struggles they might have. Grant Denyer's story, even though, it is public and people do know that he struggled in different part of his life. He had injuries and went away from TV and came back. There are a lot of things that people know, but I've never heard him talk about what that was actually like being at those depths. It's quite astonishing.
Yeah, I've been thinking, since we've done it, that it's kind of the episode. If someone said, "What's this podcast about?" I'd say, "Listen to Grant Denyer." Will get this is what this podcast is all about.
Yeah.
So
you're doing a whole podcast about Grant Denyer? God, you've done over 100 episodes on Grant Denyer.
Well, we've done 100 without him, about him. Now we've finally got him on.
Yeah, it's been the big build-up to actually getting him on. The hunt for Denyer.
When he first came in and he walked through the studio doors, I remember thinking, gosh, this man who has been performing for a lifetime and is a very, very confident performer, there was an air about him that I was thinking, gosh, he's about to say a lot of stuff here that he's probably not comfortable saying or not familiar with saying, or it's not. So he was a beautiful person. He's a beautiful person, and it's a brilliant chat.
It's certainly not the Grant Denyer that you know from Sunrise or It Takes Two or Family Feud. It's not. I mean, he is that Grant Denyer, obviously, but this is. I've never heard him speak like this before.
Yeah.
So should we move on to Grant Denyer.
Grant Denyer.
Go on Grant Denyer. And then actually, before we do that, and we will as we always do, after we chat to Grant, we'll come back and have a little chat about a few things that he talked about.
Yep.
See you soon. It is, it's only a few times per year that we feel the necessity to roll out the red carpet for a guest. But this felt necessary to get the literal red carpet, didn't even know we had it, and roll it out because we have Grant Denyer on the show today. And most people, I would imagine, know who Grant Denyer is. But
No buts. Everyone knows.
no, that's it. Let's wrap it up there.
Yeah.
But it really feels like, I was thinking as I was coming into the studio today, I was like thinking back to like this, like season 1, when we were like just trying to find good people to come on the podcast that would be really interesting and have like, I don't know, like people who have done lots of stuff. And I'm just walking in today and I was trying not to just take it for granted that Grant Denyer's just on the show today. And it is a big deal. It sort of just, I guess, reminded me like we've come a long way. Not to make it about us. But anyway, Grant, so nice to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Big fans of the podcast. And particularly, we make our own little podcast, but ours is very silly and we only tell stories normally about that time my wife her breast milk leaked out and sprayed the guy in front of us on the plane.
Right.
Like stories like that. Jeez. And then I was going through your
Did that happen?
Yes.
Wow.
It was on an international flight.
Did he know what it was?
No, he didn't. You know how, have you ever taken a bag of chips on a plane and you know when you get to like 35,000 feet, you know how the bag expands?
Oh my God. The pressure.
So, well, my wife's boobs did that, right? So she was breastfeeding at the time and she needed to express. And it was the middle of the night. So the cabin lights were down. We're going overseas. And she could sense the pressure was so great that she's pulled her bra down ready to put the suction cup on. And the pressure was so great, it just shot straight out and hit the guy in front of us, the back of his head, and he was bald. So you just see her breast milk running down the back of his head and neck.
Wow.
I mean, he would have one hell of a story. Do you know one day Grant Denyer's wife sprayed my head with breast milk? That's an incredible story.
Well, it wasn't me, No. It was my wife's.
Yeah.
But it was that's the kind of material that we talk about.
It's great material.
Yeah. But I look at your normal guests as like doctor, scientist, doctor. And now like me. So I feel
Denyer.
Dr. Denyer.
Yeah.
So I feel like an imposter here on this beautiful podcast of yours.
You are, I mean, the whole premise was people who, when you look at their life, you go, well, that's perfect. Everything's perfect. They've achieved so much. So one of my jobs is to read the bio of our guests. And your bio went on for so long. You have done so much. And so what I often do when we have a guest on is I actually write a quick summary in my notes. I summarize their bio, not to read out, just to have in my head the whole time. And instead of reading out your whole bio, I'm going to read my mental notes on today.
This is the abridged version.
Yeah, and it's like not the bridge version.
As opposed to the bridge version.
The bridge version, our producer. This is the Hugh's brain version. So never meant to be. I always, for every guest, I have this written down, and it's weird what I write down, but it works for me. So this is what I've written.
God, considering you made it a summary of the bio, the explanation of the abridged version has made it even longer.
I just don't want people thinking, no, this is my brain. Anyway. Okay. Grant is an amazing racing car driver man.
Did you write this when you were 7?
I don't know.
Or is there a comma before man?
No, there's no. This is for my man.
He's an amazing racing car driver, man. It's really colloquial.
That's Hugh's inner dialogue. He speaks like that.
This is Hugh trying to connect with Grant.
Yeah.
It's like, he's an incredible race car driver, man.
No, this is not meant to be read out. This is only for me, and I don't know why I wrote man, but it's just.
Yeah.
Grant is an amazing racing car driver man and hosts so many of Australia's best and most popular shows like Family Feud. And then I wrote in brackets 1 million and 1,500. So I think that's 1 million people would watch it every night. And you did 1,500 shows?
Yeah, yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Okay.
Whoa.
I'm glad I just wrote those numbers and I forgot why. So lots of Logies.
This is an abomination.
Lots of Logies.
I'm on the edge of my seat. This is fascinating.
But amazingly, he's probs a better race car driver man than TV host. And that's not having got your TV hosting. Your race car driving history is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Thank you.
So we'll get to that.
Okay.
2 girls, wife.
3 girls. But anyway.
You have 3 girls?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how that's wrong. How could this perfect bio be wrong?
It might have been a typo. Sailor?
Yep. Scout.
Scout?
And Sunday. She's 2. Yep.
Sorry, Sunday.
Can you write my press releases from now on? Because this is fantastic.
Okay, so 3 girls, wife. Most undies and kisses in a minute.
Oh, yes. I know what that is.
Guinness World Record.
Yeah, you hold 6 Guinness World Record. We'll get to those. So most undies and kisses a minute, but he had a serious accident.
With the undies?
This is like Hugh's Year 6 project on Grant Denyer.
If someone's never heard of me before, this is a very random way to learn about Grant Denyer.
It is.
Then I wrote
good. There's
capitals, but it was very serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, the accident. So that was, yeah.
We'll talk about that. Hopefully,
He is the Bazball of weathermen.
The Bazball.
That is.
So Bazball is like England reinvented Test cricket with the way that the entertainment that they bring to Test cricket. It's this most entertaining format possible.
Right.
And I'm saying that Grant is the Bazball of the weathermen. You completely, anyway, we'll get to that as well. Next thing it just says is Mad Dog.
Yeah.
That's your nickname.
That was my nickname, yeah.
Was your nickname
really?
on the track.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I always have a question that I just would like to get to at some point. And I guess the question I wrote here was, but at what cost? As in, you have done so much, achieved so much. At what cost, I guess? We'll get to that at some point today. So there is the strangest bio that anyone will ever get.
That was beautiful.
On this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. It's
Do
like
you think
a
it's
weird.
beautiful?
Yeah, it's like an interesting table of contents for the episode.
Yeah.
Like a dot point sort of list of things that we may or may not get to.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you, Hugh.
No, anytime.
Wow.
It was nice. I feel like my entire sort of 20 years in television just flashed before my eyes just in reading those highlights.
Yeah, certainly flashed.
Yeah.
They're sort of short flashes, weren't
Yeah,
they?
very short.
Should dot point, not a word wasted.
So it's so hard to know where to begin with all that you've achieved. Do you see yourself as a TV personality or a race car driver?
Race car driver.
Really?
Yeah, I only got into television, to be honest, to find sponsors. I wasn't from a wealthy family, and motorsport can have a nasty habit of sometimes the cream doesn't rise to the top because there needs to be so many factors that come into line for your dreams to come true in motorsport, right? Because it's an expensive sport. And, my mum and dad had separated. And I was living with my mum and I really wanted to be a race car driver.
That's Glennis?
Yep, that's Glennis. Yeah. And I thought, how the hell am I going to become a race car driver? How do you get in? How am I going to afford a go-kart? But I had big, lofty dreams and a very strong passion. And I was like, God, I need sponsors. How do I get sponsors? If I'm on television, that'd be a really good way to find sponsors. And it was as simple and as naive as that was the whole reason I got into television, was really to try and fund this passion and this almost impossible dream of becoming, a V8 supercar driver, which eventually did happen.
If I can just bang out 1,500 episodes of Family Feud, then maybe I'll get a sponsor.
It really was. It was, and I remember when I first started go-karting, I was probably about 14 or so, and my mum had no idea what she wasn't mechanically minded. She didn't know about the sport. She really didn't want me to do it. So we had this bloke who would come along on Sunday morning, pick me up at 5:30 in the morning, and he had a ute. It's the only person we knew who had a ute, and he'd pick me up and he'd take me to the go-kart track, and he'd leave me there, and I'd sit there in the pouring rain with a tarp wrapped around myself, and trying to convince someone to help me lift the go-kart off the trolley and onto the ground, and hopefully someone would push me so I could go in the race, get me going. And then that bloke would come back and pick me up in the afternoon. And I think about it and go, how hard that was, and just how unlikely that fairy tale would come true. But it eventually did. And it only did just through an undying, I think it just had I refused to allow it to be anything other than a success story. Yeah, even though it shouldn't have been.
And is that just like in just natural self-belief that is in you?
I think just blind faith, I think, and optimism. Yeah, yeah. I remember as a kid, I remember moving interstate when Mum and Dad separated, and I remember growing up in an area I didn't feel like I belonged very much. I was from another state. I couldn't talk the language of football. I was only into motorsport. No one else was into motorsport. Everyone was into footy.
This is in Melbourne.
Yeah, it's in Melbourne. And then kind of just looking around the people around me, I just didn't feel like, I belonged or I'd fit in and no one had a life. No one was living a life that I looked at and went, wow, that's a cool life. I like what that guy's doing or that lady's doing. I want to be that. I didn't feel like there was a lot of kind of hope or, big dreams being lived.
And how old were you at this point?
About sort of 14, 15, 16.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, no one's living the life that I aspire to live, then it's going to be up to me to do something about that. So I kind of wanted to drag myself up and create a life that I didn't think was possible, but, I wanted to give it a shot. And so it took a lot of courage and took a lot of risks, but, I wanted to make a go of my life. I didn't want to squander it or waste it. But that meant no one believed in me, so it was only going to be up to me.
What did the separation, your parents' separation, do to you at that time? I feel like that would be quite a vulnerable age to have your parents separate.
Yeah, I think not only the separation and losing, the dad from the household. We were living in a little coastal village called Avoca Beach on the Central Coast, really idyllic. The community would raise the kids collectively. You could ride your bike down to the beach. You could wander off, through the forests. You go exploring. It was, and then moving to Melbourne where my mum's family were from. So she had some help around her. We moved to Melbourne and Dad went to the Gold Coast. And so not only, do you kind of lose the mum and the dad dynamic in the family, but you also lose your friend network, that place that felt safe and felt familiar and where you belonged, you've now lost that as well. So, you're forced into a new community and I think that not feeling like I fit in also created some skills in me that I probably only now realize later in life, the ability to be a chameleon, to adapt and to be the funny guy, because I had nothing else to offer. I wasn't tall. I wasn't good looking. The girls weren't interested in me. So what was my act? If I was going to put my flag in the sand, what am I going to hang my hat on?
What's your hook?
Yeah, what's my hook?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just, you're just lost in the crowd.
Do you reckon that was a conscious thought? Like, what's the thing about me that makes me special? Like, how will I show people that I'm special?
I think I was scared, to be honest. I was scared of bigger kids. Being a small guy, it's hard because in high school, you're an easy target.
Mm-hmm.
Being afraid of my environment, I thought if I can win everyone over with a laugh, then it'll create a safer space for me. I think I was pretty scared. And I think being the only male in the house, I had my sister and my mum, I kind of felt at a young age responsible for their safety as well. Being the only dude there, I kind of, I really, I worried about what if, what if someone broke into the house? I'm going to have to be the first responder. I'm going to have to shut the situation down. So safety was a big part of, my youth.
That's a lot to take on.
Yeah, it is. I think watching my mum do an incredible job of raising us, on her own. We had really minimal means. We lived a modest life. She created a beautiful household. She was a very funny lady. I get my sense of humour from my mum and probably my work ethic from my dad. The house was always full of music and it was a great vibe. But yeah, I guess, I worried, for them and mum did a brilliant job of bringing us up. I only found this out much later in life that I used to think she worked in an office. Like she used to dress up, put a suit on and go to work. And I only found out much later in life that she used to put the suit on. So we thought she had an office job, but she was a house cleaner. And so she'd drive to those houses that she would clean and then she would, put her cleaning clothes on and then she would put her suit back on to come home.
Wow.
Which was just to try and I think she felt like she wanted to at least create the illusion that everything was okay and we're on top of things and that broke my heart when I found that out much later in life. That she felt like she needed to do that, like that wasn't enough or yeah.
God.
Did you stay in touch with your dad?
Yeah. My dad.
How often did you see him as a kid? Like if he was on the Gold Coast and you're in Melbourne?
Yeah, we're 2 states away. So it was, several times a year. You go there for a couple of holidays and maybe he'd come down if there was something significant in your life, like if you're in a school play or something like that.
And do you remember feelings of missing him a lot as a kid? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I don't know if it's just a boy thing, but needing that father figure around, or I think the seeking of approval from him, meant a lot to me. He played around the fringes of motorsport, so and that was a language that was very important to him. Right. So therefore, I think I inherited this strong desire to be a race car driver to get me closer to him. So we had something to communicate on. Something to.
Do you like, this isn't meant to be like a provocative question at all. I'm just sort of interested in these like ideas where significant things happen in life. Because you said that, by moving to Melbourne and after your parents separated, you were sort of thrown into this really uncomfortable environment that you weren't used to. You sort of kind of like developed skills that then sort of helped you later in life, becoming funny. And do you put any thought ever, because I do in my own life with significant things that have happened or haven't happened, do you put any thought into what your life might have been like if they didn't separate? Or if,
Yeah, I probably don't think I would have achieved anywhere near as much as I have. Yeah, I think from a strong desire to be seen, to be heard, validation, I have horrific self-talk. In my mind, I'm very savage.
As in still to this day?
Yeah.
Really?
It's something I only now later in life work very hard on, but very, very critical. Yeah, it's quite problematic. Yeah, and I think that comes from a core value of I am unlovable. So this strong desire to be, I think motor racing for me is not only a connection with my dad, but it is how do I value how I'm going in life, right? How do I know if I'm successful? Well, on a racetrack, you're either first, you're second, you're third, or you're seventh. You know what I mean? You know where you stand.
Yeah.
Because there's a number attached to it. So life can be, and TV is the same, like you might be successful in television, but what really is success? Is your show rating well? Well, your show's rating well because there's nothing on against it. It's a great format. There's good people in it. Maybe your show's not doing well. What's the wrong time slot? It's poorly made. The guests are terrible. It's a dud format. People will always tell you to your face you're fantastic, even if they do or don't mean it. So it's a very hard. I'm constantly trying to evaluate where I am.
I mean, that kind of makes me think that, like, because, Hugh mentioned so eloquently before the Guinness records. But I wonder if, like, you know, when you're doing the weather on Sunrise, I wonder if, like, that need for like a very concrete level of success, like knowing if you've like achieved, if you've done a good show or not. I mean, I wonder if that want to do, I don't know if it was your idea or not, but the Guinness World Record attempts, you either like, you've done it, you got the record, or you didn't get the record. And it's almost like, because I know what you mean, like it's hard to really measure a success, especially in comedy. Like it's like, well, it's just such a subjective thing. So, you know, 100 people might laugh, but the one person who doesn't laugh might make you think it wasn't good. And so, but if you get the record and you do get that many kisses in however much time it was,
60 seconds,
then you go like, that was a good show because I got the record.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
Instant validation, you know, that that you've done the thing. You're doing good. You're doing good because you've got the certificate to prove it. And I think that you become addicted to those as well. You know, it's quite problematic. You know, you get one Guinness World Record, now you go, oh, maybe I get another one.
One's not enough.
Yeah, you're right. And race wins are the same. You know, you can never have enough race wins. You're right. It's undeniable that you are succeeding because you have the ribbon.
And you can show that to anyone.
Yeah.
And that is a universal symbol for, I did a good job.
Yeah.
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 I wonder, I'm sort of, it's kind of heartbreaking to hear you say that you feel unlovable, which is, it's a very common thing to feel, I think. But and you say like later in life, you've done a lot of work on it and you've, you know, no doubt analysed and thought about it. Have you thought or come to any conclusions as to why that is?
I think invariably, I think I feel a bit broken inside, and I don't know where that comes from or why. You know, I think the constant negative talk of, you know, so if you were in my head, it'd be, you know, of course you said that, you dickhead. You know, you always say stupid things. You know, why did you do it that way and not that way? Well, it's because you're an idiot. You know, I don't know why I have a very low self-worth. I don't know where that came from or why. I don't know if it's, you know, I think I probably blame the separation, you know, on my mum and dad, probably on myself. You know,
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think if it comes down to it, and that doesn't mean that's true, but I think that's probably how I felt as a kid. You know, maybe if I was nicer, or maybe if I wasn't as annoying, you know, maybe they'd still be together, or maybe, maybe if I could have made, you know, life a little bit easier, you know, for my mom, you know, she would have had an easier time of it. You know, it's, you're constantly, I guess, replaying those scenarios through your head, what you could have done differently. And that sort of, that perfectionism that's driven me professionally hasn't served me very well as a person. It's quite a damaging thing, perfectionism.
Such a sad image in my head of like a 12, 13-year-old boy moving states thinking this is all because of me somehow, or like I'm responsible for this separation. And that's a really, as Ryan said, that's a very heartbreaking thing to think about.
Well, as an adult now who's in an active and loving relationship, I know now that not to be true, but that still doesn't change the fact that that's how I felt, and that still runs through my DNA.
Hard to get rid of that.
Yeah.
Hard to get rid of that long thought.
Yeah, and I certainly don't blame my mum or my dad, you know, for the circumstances. They were very young, you know, got relationships, you know, more often fail than succeed. So, but yeah, I think I just missed that family unit, you know. I felt like no one's looking after me now. You know, everyone's just trying to survive. And I felt like that, everyone's just trying to hang on. So I'm going to have to look after myself.
It's incredibly self-aware, some of the stuff you've said about feeling like you're unlovable. I've felt the same about myself for a lot of my life. But then something a little bit has changed for me since having a family. Sorry if this is too much of a pointed question, but do you feel deserving of the love that you get from your kids and your wife?
No, I don't. I don't. I love it.
Mm.
Yeah, but I struggle with that. And in fact, I've at times pushed my wife away because I don't feel like I deserve it. And I think I have pushed her away because I fear the inevitable breakup's coming. So I will push her away to minimize, the pain when it invariably does happen. So we've had a relationship often where I have pushed her away. It's kind of like a rubber band, our relationship. It sort of comes and goes, tightens and loosens and tightens and loosens. But yeah, it's
Wow.
yeah, it must be exhausting for her,
both of you.
he was this day and now he's this that day, like why is he pushing me away? And yeah, I think pain minimization is the tactic there. But yeah.
Do you just with that question you just asked, is that because do you feel worthy of a love from your family, or do you feel similar to Grant? Or
I think about sorry, this is making about me, but about 2 months ago, I caught up with some old mates and was having a drink with them. And to be honest, I was a bit drunk, so emotions can come to the surface. But I found myself having this realization that, like, I don't quite understand why they would. I think there's a deep-seated thing in me of, like, I don't understand why people would want to be friends with me.
oh,
And so I do feel that still, and I feel kind of surprised when people want to hang out with me or spend time with me, but I don't. But I don't think that about my family.
right.
I think that's the first time in my life where I haven't felt
Okay.
that. But I was surprised because I thought when the love and connection that's come along with my boys and my wife, that felt like, oh yeah, that now I get it. Now I feel like I deserve this. So I thought all that stuff was gone, but then it was this like terrifying moment of realization where I was like, actually, I still feel this about every other social interaction.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I feel the same way about friends.
Yeah.
Particularly. I have a horrible response to my phone. It's almost it's quite crippling. Like if I hear a message go off, I go, fuck, I'm letting someone down. I instantly go, this is someone's going to want something and I'm not going to know how to respond, and I'm not going to be able to say the right thing, so I'll leave it. And then I leave it and with intention to come back with a thoughtful response that either is humorous or supportive. And then invariably too much time passes and now I haven't got back to them, and now it's too late and I'm a shit friend. So my phone,
And that's confirmation of your belief. That,
exactly.
Yeah.
Then I'm a terrible friend. And I think a lot of this came from doing Sunrise Weather, right? So 8 years I was on the roads, a different part of the country every single day. For that segment to be successful, it needed to be spontaneous. So you needed the audience to go, I wonder where they are. I wonder what he's doing today. So that meant you had to be in Darwin one day, Ballarat the next, Perth the day after that.
Relentless.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Uluru after that. And so you were, like we had, so I think I had 300 flights in 2.5 years. Sorry, 750 flights in 3.5 years.
Jeez.
So it was full on.
I mean, I know
Platinum one all the way.
I was just going to say, I can't even imagine your status credits.
Well, early days was with Ansett, and so they took a million.
no.
They took 1 million of me points, and I was spewing.
Yes.
Just because it would have been lifetime of free Bali flights.
Yes. Yeah.
But with that, and as awesome as that gig was, because you could do anything you wanted from wherever you wanted. And there's no other gig in television as free as that.
Well, you were given I read that when you were first offered the job, it was you do whatever you want. Like do the weather, but do it however you want, just be entertaining.
Well, they came to me and said, I was a journo and I was a shit journo. Like I knew I wasn't a very smart kid, right? So academically I struggled. I probably now realize that I had some kind of, learning disability.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my parents kind of having phone calls, interstate, and I could sense them. They were genuinely very concerned. I think what I was going to, make of this life. What am I capable of? I wasn't doing very well at school, and I could sort of just sense them like, fuck, he's just going to, what's he going to do? He's not going to be capable of much. And so I had to find another way to get into the industry because I academically wasn't going to be able to go to university for journalism. I was never going to have the score high enough to be able to do that. So my back door into the industry was to go and work for free in school holidays. So I would travel on a bus between Melbourne and Wagga Wagga to work at Prime TV Wagga Wagga, where I'd carry tripods and wash the news cars and just ask lots of questions and just try and be as useful as possible. Because that's all I had. Just be useful. You're not going to be the smartest. You're not going to get in through a university degree unlike everyone else who's in that newsroom. So just be useful and hope that that's enough. And then sure enough, they taught me how to write and then use your voice. And I'd take the news car at night time and with the scanners, and I taught myself to shoot. So I'd listen to the police scanners, and if there was like a fatality up the road, I'd drive up and I'd film it at night time because the other cameramen were too cranky and they didn't want to do a night shift. So I taught myself to shoot, taught myself to edit. And then that was kind of the beginning of that sort of work ethic of, okay, well, if you can't be good, just work harder and be more useful. Or if you can't be good, be cheap. That was the other theory.
Sometimes that's out of your hands.
So it was.
That's actually. You watched the Schwarzenegger series on Netflix. I think that's how he ends. I think that's how it ends. It's like that was his dad's advice to him. Is like something like work hard, be useful.
Yeah.
Something similar to that.
Yeah, and it's true. Do what others don't want to do. If that person doesn't want to stay back an extra hour to do the thing, you do it. Just be the first to put your hand up. And that's all I had. That's all I had, up my sleeve. So I learned to be a journo. I remember the first story I ever did, I realised I didn't want to be a journo anymore because all the other journos were out on jobs and there was a car accident. And so the news director goes, righto, GD, this is your first story. No one else is available. Off you go, big boy. Put your big journo pants on and away you go. And I was like all excited. I got my notepad. I got my pen. I only had one suit, and then and my tie was from my grandfather, and I wore that same suit and same tie every single day.
Oh.
And I went to do a story, and I got there, and the car, there was a guy driving into the sun on his way to work, and then coming the other way was a wide load, and he was driving. Do you remember the Ford Capri? They were like a little soft top.
Is that where the headlights pop up the top?
Yeah,
at the front.
Yeah. There was a guy driving one of those, and the wide load had come along, and he didn't see it because the sun was in his eyes, and it had decapitated him.
Oh my God!
So I just rock up first story I've ever done.
Oh my God.
Get up there, like no police officers like, hey mate, you might want to go over there, or no one sort of gave me any heads up that this is what I was walking up to. I walked straight up to the car, and it's just body parts everywhere. And I'm like, I don't think I'm cut out for this. I don't think this is what I want to do.
Fair enough.
This is heavy, and I'm not emotionally equipped to deal with this. And so I think it was at that very early moment on I realised I'm not a journo. If this gives people satisfaction, then this is obviously not the career for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was already committed, right? So I'm now in a career. I've just started it, and now I think it's the wrong career. So I kind of stick it out. But then I realised as I moved to I remember being down here in Melbourne. There was a news director there, and I get down there, and I'd become like the cat up a tree guy, at Prime TV Wagga. I thought I'll do the colour stories.
Yeah.
If there's a flower show on, I'm your guy.
Yeah.
I'll go do that. I'll go do those yarns.
So you said that to your boss. You said,
Yeah.
I want to do
No
the
more
fun stories.
decapitations.
I think he realised pretty early on. I wasn't a political animal. I wasn't particularly that worldly. I wasn't an ambulance chaser. So what good am I? I'll do the colour stories,
Yeah.
the ones, just at the end of the bulletin. I remember coming down to this news director down here in Sydney, and he's like, nothing. We don't do that shit down here. Forget colour stories. I'm going to have to pull you down and completely rebuild you into a journo. you're fucking terrible.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, oh, God, this is bad. This
And you're
is
like,
really
God, I'm
bad."
getting enough of this from my inner voice. I don't need it from an outer voice as well.
And then one day I thought, you know what? I'll just try and slip in a colour yarn. I'll just try and I found a producer that would kind of slip the script through. I found an editor that would work on it quietly without the news director knowing. And I remember at 6 o'clock, the news director would come out and he'd watch the bulletin, and I knew my story was coming up. And I'm like, oh, God, he told me I'd never be able to do a colour story, and I've got one. And the story starts. I look at his face. He's like stone cold, nothing, no emotion, zero. And my piece to camera's coming up. It's a pretty wacky piece to camera. It starts. I'm watching him through the corner of my eye. Again, still nothing, no reaction. I thought, oh, my God, my career's over here. And then the story finished, and he goes, "That, are we allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was fucking hilarious. I want more of that."
Oh,
And I'm like, woo!
Gosh.
And from that moment on, I just became the colour guy. So I had a spot in the National Bulletin right before sport. So the light and fluffy story before sport became mine.
wow. It really is, having done, dabbled in like comedy, attempted comedy for a while, it's like that feeling where you've got someone literally saying to you, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
That is a drug you then
Yeah.
continue to chase for the rest of your life.
But had he said, I never want to see that again, my career would have been completely different. It probably would have ended there and then, because I would have I'm not like these other journos. I'm not built that way.
Can't do
I
it.
can't do that.
Yeah.
So thank God he went, I love it. I want more of it. Because from there, it just, it took off. I remember
Incredible.
my favourite story from Melbourne was I went to this lady's house, and the story was she has a horse that sleeps in her bed. This is the kind
Nothing's
of...
us. We're just friends. It's just to save on rent, really.
It would literally walk up to the bed and then it would just lay on its side with its head on the pillow. And she thought this was like completely normal.
Wow. Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe she's the normal one. That is wild.
So
wow.
that's that summarises my career as a journalist. perfectly.
So then from a journalist, then, I mean, this is a very clear progression to doing weather. Was it as simple as then Channel 7 going like, you'd be really good at doing colour stories every morning on Sunrise? As part of the
No,
weather?
what it was, so they were just rebuilding Sunrise into, like, the Today Show had been number one for 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
Sunrise was nowhere to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just done, no journo wants to do the Royal Easter Show in Sydney. So actual journos, the people who do politics or finance or
Yeah.
actual
Decapitations,
journos.
yeah.
Need decapitations. No one wants to do the Royal Easter Show. So I went to the news director and said, give me your 14 days and I'll make each one different. And I did that. And then I got a phone call from the executive producer of Sunrise going, I've never seen someone polish a turd better than you. You are the perfect weatherman for us. Would you come and do it? And I was like, I don't want to be a weatherman. I felt weather you'd only ever be a weatherman.
Mm-hmm.
You'd get tired with that brush and you'd never be able to shake it off. So I said no. And then they kept asking. And I was like, what if I made it almost about anything other than the weather? And they said, as long as you read the temperature for Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane that day, do whatever you want. And I was like, whatever I want.
That is a tempting
Yeah.
carrot. Yeah.
So that's when it became
Bazball.
an adventure travel segment. You were jumping out of helicopters, you were wrestling crocodiles. I remember I got a call from the news director one day because I'd had my hand up a horse on breakfast television, pregnancy testing a horse on television.
Yeah.
I think I remember that. I actually think I remember watching that.
And just go, and he rings me and goes, today. I said, yeah. He goes, that was a bit far. I went,
What, like literally?
I was up to my shoulder.
Up to your shoulder.
I was up
That
to
is
my
too
shoulder
far,
the
yeah.
whole way in. He goes, you got to remember, people are eating their cornflakes. I was like, you know what? You're actually right.
Good point.
That was a bit much.
Yeah.
But it became a challenge to how do I outdo the day before?
Yeah.
I know this is what I'm about to say now is probably more of a concluding summary thing, but I just feel the urge to tell you right now, But like we've been chatting now for probably about an hour, including we chatted 15 minutes before we turned the mics on. You are so lovable. You are such a lovable person. And I thought that before we turned the mics on.
Yeah.
I really felt that. Like,
Thank you.
you sort of you're very, you can make very quick judgments sometimes. Often you're pretty correct. I felt so quickly, if I was to describe you after a few minutes, like, this is such a lovable person. I just feel the need to tell you now, like, rather than wait to the end, because that to me, of you feeling not lovable, I would like you to know from someone who's just met you, I think you're quite the opposite.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Relationships within the entertainment industry, you especially if you've got the inner thoughts of, I'm not lovable. I feel like that would be a challenge. It'd be a challenging industry to navigate because, as you know, it's like you're hot or you're cold.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know whether do they actually like me or am I just useful to them at the moment?
Yeah.
So how was your experience with that?
I think because I had no self-confidence, because I didn't think I was worthy or capable, I invariably, the saying, you dress for the job you want, not the one you've got.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that theory that you always look like you look like you should be at that level, and then the universe will conspire for it to happen, or the management will conspire to give you the promotion. So what I would do was I'd kind of, because I didn't believe in my own ability to be enough or to do a good job, I would basically look at a number of other people and go, okay, well, I like how Ryan does that, so I'll take a little bit of that, how you do that. I got Larry Emdo, I like how he does that. I like how Rove does that. I like how Carl Stefanovic does that. And I made myself the sum of other people. So I was just like wearing a coat that were just bits of others. And that's kind of how I got by. But that became quite exhausting because you're only the sum of other people.
I totally relate to that. In terms of then relationships in the industry, does that almost become like an armor that you if you're ever criticized or abandoned or by someone or whatever in the industry, you're almost like protecting your true self. It's like, well, that's not me. That's like the sum of all these people. So
you're not exposing your vulnerabilities or your soft spots to be poked. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is like a suit of armor.
Yeah.
I remember when I left Sunrise, I had like pretty much a breakdown, to be honest. I remember I was the guy at 7, right? I was doing all the big shows. I was doing Australia's Got Talent. There was a singing show called It Takes Two. You're doing Sunrise. I was racing V8 supercars. I was working in the telecast. I was getting all the big gigs.
Yeah. If they were doing a big show, they wanted you to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember doing all that travel for Sunrise, and then just getting to the end of realizing that I'd gone past empty. I'm now into my reserves. It's getting dangerous now, how exhausted I was. I remember going to the doctor, and the doctor said, your organs are running at about 7%. He said, you're gonna die if you keep going like this. And I remember going to the network and saying, look, I can't do this anymore. I have to leave.
Is this the weather?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was raining its tits off. The weather was, an important part of the show, and you could see the audience liked it because there were audience spikes, in that little 5-minute segment after the news all the time. And the CEO was like, mate, can you just do one more year? Just one more year. Just for me, mate. Just for me. And I'm like, I don't think I can. Yeah, come on, mate. Just as a friend. So then you go, okay, I'll give you one more. And then you get to the end of that year. Come on, mate, just one more. Can you do another one? And I'm like, okay. I ended up giving them 3. And then it got to the point where no one was listening. No one no one really cared how I was going. And I clearly wasn't very well. And me being me, I'm trying to give it 1,000%. You know, how do I make the last broadcast that I did 25 minutes ago better than, how do I make this one better than the last one? And every time I was trying to opt out, every time I was trying to put the white flag up and say, I can't do it anymore, I have to stop. You know, I was coaxed into doing it again, and no one was checking on my welfare, and I just got to a point where I had to just cut and run. So I just decided, you know, the situation wasn't going to change because there was too much riding on it unless I changed it. And so I just announced it one morning on Sunrise and just said, guys, I'm out. I can't do it anymore. No one was listening. No one wanted to hear that I wanted to hang up, you know, I'll wear the boots.
So did you announce this like on air or?
Yeah, just announced it on air, yeah.
Because you probably felt like I have to.
Yeah, that was the only option. No one was listening to anything else, and no one wanted to help. Not one person said, "Are you okay?"
So that kind of helped this fear that you're not lovable if you're struggling and you feel like no one actually, they care more about the ratings than you as a person.
Yeah, and I think that's where I spiraled from that because I realised.
Sorry, what year was this? This is
about 2012.
okay, yeah.
And then I realised I felt for the first time like I was just a commodity that was being mined, being exploited. And look, and that might not be true, but that's how I felt at the time. And then I kind of resented television then because no one had my well-being in mind. And then I kind of, I went down a pretty dark hole from that moment on. You know, I hated the industry. I hated the game. You know, I walked away from it. I walked away from my relationship with Channel 7 at that particular point because I was so unwell that my wife and I had to go and get some help.
So what did you do to cope in that time? Or what do you turn to when you're that low?
Well, it was sort of post broken back. So I was still sort of managing. I broke my back in 2008, and I was still having issues with the pain meds as well. And I was using the pain meds to stand up to keep working, basically. And so it became an issue, you know, where they became too strong a priority in my life, and I was abusing them too much to keep working. So.
And this was like while you were still traveling around the country, doing this weather and just like battling this pain. And is it like a reliance on the pain meds? Is that sort of what it got to?
It crosses over where there's a point where, so when you first have an injury, take the pain meds, takes the pain away. But then after a while, it's very easy for it to slip from the feeling that you have is not pain, it's the withdrawal from the drugs. So it's not. It's very hard to know whether the injury has improved, but you're in withdrawals. But there was such a physical demand on the job that I was doing. Plus, you know, I was racing cars as well. So, that I couldn't function without them. You know, but they're a powerful drug. They're very dangerous, and the things that I did and said to my wife on those pain medications, you know, I'm still deeply ashamed and embarrassed of. You just have no control. You know, whenever you close your eyes, whenever you go to sleep, you immediately go into your worst fears every single night. So your worst fear might be, you know, your wife leaving you, or your wife cheating on you, or a home invasion, or whatever it is. You go immediately into it. But when you wake up, you can't tell the difference between the reality and not. So you believe that that's exactly what's happened. So I could barely walk, early stages in the broken back injury, and I would come out. I'd crawl across the floor out to fight off people who I thought had broken into our home and were raping my wife.
Like quite literally.
Yeah. So
wow.
It's sort of that every day, you know. Or I'd come out and my wife would be on the computer and I go, "Oh, thank you very much," and she'd say, "What?" And I go, I know you went to London and back today without me.
Oh,
Thank you.
Shit.
And she just has to go, oh, yep, sorry. It's just,
She'd have to go along with it. Like there wasn't
Yeah.
even a point arguing it. There was no point
No.
saying that.
because then in
Clearly
my
hasn't happened.
mind, she's trying to cover it up and she's trying to, to deceive me and lie. So it was just easy for her to go, yep, I did go to London today. Sorry.
And that's as a result of the pain meds. And what was that? What were you taking? What was the
OxyContin.
right?
Yeah, OxyContin. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I don't
Horrific.
know much about it, but I know there's a new series I think about
Yeah,
the
there is,
industry
yeah.
called Painkiller.
Well,
Which
it's called hillbilly heroin, for a reason. And thankfully I was able to get off it. But not everyone does, and not everyone can. When you have an injury, you go to a hospital. The hospital treats the injury. They get the back, they fix your bone, they put it in place, they put a cast on it, and you're good to go. But then they boot you out the door with all these pain meds. With no warning as to what's going to happen and what you're going to do, and there's no warning to your partner about what they're about to experience. There's no education with how hardcore these things are. They just go, righto, here's some scripts. Go for your life. And it's horrific. Like I remember one night I decided I wanted some scotch. And we lived in Chinatown in Sydney in a little apartment. I went missing in the middle of the night in my undies, wandering the streets in the dark to go get some scotch. Got lost on the way back, and my wife found me 4 hours later in the fire escape, trapped. And I was lying on the ground next to a human poo, someone else's poo. I was just lying there in my undies on a concrete fire escape next to someone's shit. And you just go, that's such a sad vision, but that's how bad it can go for anyone. And you could be on them tomorrow if you had an injury. You could be on them. You could be on them. It's hardcore stuff.
This is nowhere near comparable, but like I had surgery on my leg back in 2015, and the night I got home from the hospital, my wife Penny we'd been together for about probably under a year then, and she had maybe her 30th, or she had a birthday party. I couldn't go. I went for a little bit, came home. I was on crutches and I was on painkillers. And when she got home, I just accused her of cheating on me for like an hour, flat out for an hour, like Penny of all. Yeah, I was like, I know you've cheated on me. I know. And she was like, what?
And also, you don't think like that.
No, I've never, ever thought like I've never been jealous or insecure in my relationship. And Penny's would never, that's just not her makeup. And then I was playing cricket at the time. My mate picked me up in the morning to go to cricket. And the whole way in the car, I was just watching obviously because I wasn't playing, but the whole way in the car I was telling him, he's a doctor. And I said, I think Penny cheated on me last night. And he goes, what? And I went, yeah. And he goes, Penny? And I went, yeah, she was. And he goes, what happened? I went, she was just out. And he went, yeah, but what led you to think that? And I said, oh, nothing. I just know she did. And he went, what meds are you on? What's the, and I remember telling him, and he's like, mate, I think that, yeah, I don't think she did, but, and then he explained that it was the meds, and then it was nothing like a broken back. So for me, I was just like, oh, I'm off these straight away.
Yeah.
I'll take the pain of a hamstring reattachment every day over the week over this feeling. So I've had that feeling for 12 hours, and I was lucky that I could go off the meds straight away because the pain was bad, but not a broken back level. So
Yeah. It's scary when your reality is deceiving you.
yeah,
You know what I mean? You have no control over that. It's horrific. What it does psychologically is, there should be a support group for the partners of those who have had these injuries and are on these medications.
It sounds like it.
So we should meet together. Like the things that I did to poor old Chez, and we'd only just really been together for a couple of months. So we went straight into, a blossoming brand new relationship suddenly became nurse-patient, which is a problematic dynamic because it creates a very codependent relationship, and we're still trying to untangle some of those boundaries that were
So what
crossed.
does she mean to you? This person who has seen it all from a very early point in a relationship, and not only has she decided to stay? But she's like, I want a family with this person. I want my life with this person. What does she mean to you?
To me, it doesn't make sense. You know, kind of like when we're talking about friends. You know, you know, you're a shit friend. Well, you know, you kind of go, I feel like I'm a shit partner. You know, for putting her through that. Yeah, I don't know if I'd be here. You know, without her. Yeah. It got to a point when I was really broken, when I was really unwell, and I'd walked away from telly. I didn't really care if I lived or died. Yeah. I just had nothing left. And I think she just sort of just helped me put that one foot in front of the other, just to keep going, just one foot in front of the other. Don't think of the outcome. Don't think of the end result. Just think of that one step. And then just, you know, one step after another, you climb out, up that ladder out of that big, dark, deep hole. Yeah, but yeah.
It's just unthinkable heroics. I think when partners can be there so unconditionally, particularly at the beginning of a relationship like that, it's quite unfathomable. But I guess that's love. I guess.
Yeah. Say it, mate. You must be pretty lovable.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've certainly tested her, that's for sure.
When you're being incredibly open to us today, but you also seem like you're in having only met you today, you seem like you're in a fantastic place as a person, or at least certainly not in the place you're describing. Can you remember what happened and when, or maybe I should just ask you, did you start to feel like yourself again at some point? And can you remember when that happened and how? Get your mind back sort of thing?
Yeah, I think getting off the pain meds, I think we went away overseas to sort of just get a little bit of help. You know, I'd given Chezzi PTSD, like a decent amount of PTSD. So she needed a little help as well. And then together we sort of worked on ourselves. I remember I was making a game show called $1 Million Minute, and I didn't really want to be a game show host. And it was quite a serious and straight sort of quiz show, and I wasn't really a serious and straight presenter. But I was very unwell, and then just sort of left, jumped on a plane. I was supposed to come back to finish off the season. This is sort of in November. If Chezzi and I didn't go and get help, we knew it was going to be bad. I remember arriving at the airport. As I was getting on the plane, I just grabbed my phone, I just dropped it in a bin, so no one could chase me, no one could find me. You know, I couldn't have those messages. I wouldn't have been able to handle, where are you? Where did you go? I just left the network.
And this is mid-production of that show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I could sense that it had to be done, and it had to be now, and we had to do it together. So we did that. And so getting that kind of treatment and help, and then sort of so Chez could work on her PTSD and I could sort of work on getting healthier again, and that lifted the load a little bit. But I thought I'd burned my career. I thought, you don't walk away from a network.
Sorry to jump in, but it's like it does in the abstract. People listening might be like, oh, well, it's just a TV show. But there is an element of like when you're in it and you're in the network and you're doing this big show and you're the main person or significant role that it can't go on without you. It does feel like it is the most important thing in the world.
Yeah, it does.
And you're made to believe that it is. You kind of need to buy into it for it to be successful to a certain degree. But yeah, I mean, to walk away from it mid-production, I mean, I can't.
And not tell them.
and not
Just
tell
leave.
them.
Just
I mean-
leave and ghost them.
I mean, I just can't help but think like logistically, like what do they do when all the staff show up? It's like it is a huge move. It just makes me realize like how vital the timing was for you, or how critical it was for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And how desperate you must have been because I was struck by a phrase that you said a lot earlier, and I've been trying to think of how to put it into a question. But you talked about when you're a teenager, not wanting to squander life and waste it.
Yeah.
And you've done so much and worked so hard. I imagine that leaving that could have felt like squandering and wasting. So to do that, how desperate you must have been.
Yeah. It was like have a career and die or go get fixed. And it was just one or the other. And so I walked out on that career knowing that they will never want to hire me again. That's it. And not only that, my reputation's probably tarnished across all networks. No one will want to hire me. So I still chose health over the career that I'd spent, 15, nearly 20 years building, or 15 at that point.
Yeah.
And I made the call. And I thought, I had a 2-year-old at that point. So, if not for me, for them.
Mm.
So being a people pleaser, I am perfectionist, to then abandon that career and let all those production people down. They're basically just sitting around the studio waiting for me to turn up.
It's great.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then still to be able to do that took an enormous amount of strength.
I mean that decision of the way how you put it, which is like have a career and die, or be healthy and have a relationship and be a dad, and that is a like as a performer. I mean, I've never been in that situation, but I do know what it's like to have those conversations with your ego, and to be like, what is more important? Because I know. You're trying to fight with your ego about something that isn't going to actually make you feel any better, but you can't help but chase the approval of what might come if you do a good job.
Mm.
Wowee.
Mm.
It also seems like a line and this might be me analysing too much, but it also seems like a line in the sand moment where you decided you were worthy of love, like loving yourself.
No, I had very little self-love. It was really only the love for my daughter and not wanting to fuck her life up.
Mm.
And it was borderline.
Yeah. Wow.
I didn't want it to go so far that she was irreparably damaged.
Mm.
And that's the only factor that came into it. I had to do it for that.
This is it's a really cliched question, but I'm genuinely interested. Like if current day Grant gets to talk to 15-year-old Grant, what does he say?
Well, you are enough.
Mm.
You are enough.
So you do feel that now?
Yeah. It's a work in progress, but yeah. Comfort in my own skin. Being able to talk like this, like I wouldn't have been able to talk like this, back when I was, doing the weather or hosting those TV shows. Or,
Did it feel like when you talked about sort of wearing the jacket of all the people that you admire, did it feel like when you were having success, it was you having success, or
No.
it was just?
Yeah, no, it was never fulfilling, and I think that thirst was never quenched. It was never enough, Were we number one last night on Australia's Got Talent? Yes, we were. It was was never enough. You're constantly, again, more Guinness World Records, more race wins, more TV shows. It was never enough. And throwing it all away was a nice, healthy reset. But then when Family Feud came along, again, I was really a game show. A game show nearly sent me to the grave. So I was really worried about, this Channel 10 coming up. My career was dead. It was in ashes. This lifeline comes. Fucking game show. So I was starting to shake, and it was giving me, it was triggering me. And then eventually I said, I said no to it. But I said, look, I've never done an audition. Can I do an audition just for the sake of an audition? They said,
Never heard of someone requesting an audition.
It was weird. And I went in, it was this room about this size, and there was just 2 trestle tables, and that was it. And then we just sort of played a round of Family Feud, and I laughed. And it's like the first time I'd laughed, I reckon, in 5 years.
I mean, there's something very poetic about the fact that the show that brought you back was a show about family. After what you went through.
Yeah, it about the success kind of not feeling like it was mine.
Mm.
I shouldn't put so much emphasis or importance on. I'm going to mention this because you guys haven't. Gold Logie, winning a Gold Logie.
No, I said at the start, lots of Logies.
Okay, yeah. You forgot the colour. The colour is
sorry,
really important.
Yeah.
It's the only colour that really matters.
And I feel like it's not evolved of me to put such importance on that moment. But I think I get a bit emotional talking about it, which is weird because there's just a bloody Gold Logie. But I think for the first time in my life, was like, you've made it. You've made it. Fucking just relax.
Yeah.
So good.
And I just remember I remember just trying so hard for so long. I felt like I was on a treadmill just with it cranked up to bloody 11, and I was just sprinting my whole life. And the Gold Logie happened, and like my shoulders dropped, and I was like, oh, you can relax now. You've done it, mate. You've done it. You did it. You bloody did it.
Mm.
That dream when you were 14, 15, when no one thought you were going to have a career because you weren't smart enough, and you hand built each little rung on that ladder, and you bloody made it. And I think that's when that coat came off. And I finally gave myself permission to be myself.
Yeah.
When before I was just an amalgam of everyone else. Yeah.
That must feel. Do you still feel that good about, like, has that feeling gone away, or is it?
No.
That's awesome.
No.
Oh, I feel like I cannot wait to go and watch your acceptance speech of that Gold Logie.
Pretty hardcore.
I can imagine. I think I vaguely remember it, but if it exists on YouTube, we'll put it in the show notes because I imagine it'll be pretty contextual to what we're talking about.
I didn't realize what it meant until it happened.
Mm.
I didn't really give it a heck of a lot in the lead up to it. It was exciting, and it was a nice bit of buzz, nice bit of validation. But when I just walked up there, it just all came out.
Of course.
And it's cool, and it's still cool. It still makes the hair stand up in the back of my neck. And again, it's just a trophy, right? And I hope that I've done enough work that those things, those material things, don't make up who I am. But that moment was, I think, when I was just like, I can finally just be me. And that's enough.
It's almost like a symbol of how far you've come. It's like I know it's a trophy, but it's almost like to acknowledge what you have been through. It's like a physical recognition of just a reminder when you say it, wherever you keep it at home, just that I have gone through so much and look where I've got to.
I keep it on the bonnet of my car, like just as a hood ornament.
Under the bonnet of your car?
On the bonnet of my car.
The Gold Logie.
You know how the Prime Minister has flags on the front of his car? It's just glued on there, and I just drive around. No, fuck.
Yeah. And if someone sees it, then so be it. You know?
That's on them. Well, it's a lot more than a trophy. If it got you that ability to take off the jacket and to be yourself, that's a lot more than just a hood ornament.
I think this chronic fatigue thing, that the breakdown that I had, I think, was from exhaustion, from pretending to be someone and something else for so long. I was so exhausted. You know, when they say that depression is, deep rest. You need deep rest from the character that you've been playing.
Never heard
and
that.
I couldn't play that character anymore. And I needed a deep rest from that character that I had created. and I just couldn't do it anymore. And then so winning that little trophy was like, okay, I don't have to do that anymore.
Can I ask, when you're performing, how is the feeling different? The feeling of like being on Sunrise, where you're performing as this amalgam of masks, and you're not really yourself, but you've like settled into a groove and the character's working, and the segment is successful, it's getting praise, it's working really well. So there's an element of validation there, and there's an element of satisfaction, no doubt, in doing that. So then you're comparing that to how you feel doing like Family Feud, where you feel more like yourself, or like post Gold Logie, where you're performing as yourself. How's the feeling different when you're mid-performance?
You're more present. You're less aware of how things are going and how you're coming across. You're less paranoid about putting yourself in the mind of the audience, trying to read what they might be thinking about your performance.
Yeah.
And you can just enjoy it rather than be overly analytical about it. What I love about entertainment is, for me, I love the fact that entertainment can take your mind off your troubles, right? I don't know if it's just growing up in, as a kid with mum or living simply, that you'd watch a television show, say something like The Late Show, which I was a massive fan of.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how bad a day you're having, no matter how much, you might be struggling to pay your bills, you might not have any friends, work might be horrible, you could watch that little square in the corner of the room and it can take you a million miles away. Escapism is so important to me because it took me a million miles away from any issues I was having as a kid. I loved that. It's a magic box. So that to me is a gift that I don't throw away, right? That's, for me, first and foremost, I always want to create something that makes you feel like you're having a good time, because life's hard. We've all got our battles. We've all got our challenges. It can be brutal. But if I can make something that makes you laugh and makes you feel better, what a privilege. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to remember I had the weather segment. I just came after 8 minutes of news, the doom and gloom and death and destruction of the most horrific things in the world. So I had this little 3-minute window where it was my job to lift you back up and put you back on your feet and make you giggle. That's whatever it was I was doing. Maybe I was standing on the steps of the Opera House naked, or maybe I was wrestling a crocodile, or maybe it was getting another Guinness World Record. But that was an honor that I cherish, and I still feel that that's the most powerful. Yes, television can also educate, and it can change the conversation, and it can be progressive and move us forward, as human beings. But to me, it's about, I want to make you feel better, and that's cool. I got a big kick out of that. Yeah.
Awesome. I hope you get very good Christmas presents from Steve Jacobs and Sam Mack every year. Because you certainly paved the way for that type of television, for sure.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool. Yeah, did some crazy stuff. Can
I ask about your parents now? You talked at the start about how much you want your dad's, like a lot of us, our parents' recognition and love. I mean, like all of us really. But how do they perceive your career and what you've achieved, and is that something that is talked about at all?
Yeah, Dad's very proud. Very, very proud. I felt like when I was younger that I had nothing to offer him. You know what I mean? Like it's like he lived 2 states away. I think I'm more of a burden in his life than I am a blessing or a benefit. That's how I felt when I was younger. We connected. We're a lot closer now, sort of in the last 10, 15 years, and we're super close now. But yeah, he remarks that it's a fairy tale life. How incredible that it's ended up this way. Yeah, and that's a special thing to reflect on. Yeah, my mum had. It was quite difficult because my dad sort of worked in radio, and I think that she felt that perhaps the media was part of the reason that maybe they broke up.
Mm.
But the influence of that kind of people and that kind of lifestyle, and I'm speaking on her behalf here, and I don't know whether this is entirely true, but I got a sense that she doesn't like the people in the media. She definitely doesn't like, she doesn't like the falseness, the fakery, the people telling you to your face you're amazing. She doesn't like that kind of people. And so then making a conscious decision to go into the media, was quite conflicted for me, because I could sense it was pretty triggering for my mum, particularly when she can see you turning into your dad a little bit. You look like him, you sound like him. That was quite traumatic for her. I remember, being an obnoxious little shit, as a teenager, and she'd go, "Oh God, you sound just like your father," and I'd be like, "Oh, I couldn't help the fact that I looked like him, I sounded like him." And I remember that hurting her and just going, just my presence and my existence is causing her pain. And that was, so making a decision to go into media I felt like it was kind of throwing more daggers at my mum. So I kind of still feel sort of bad about that, but I made it my mission, and I think this is her influence, to just make sure you're genuine, make sure you're not a dickhead. I've had my times when I have been a pain in the ass and probably not a great employee, and my ego got in the way, but she's always bestowed on me the importance of just not being a wanker. Yeah. So although she didn't really want me to go into the industry, I think she gave me the right attitude. Yeah.
At the top of the interview, I asked you if you saw yourself as a racing car driver or a media personality, and I think just over this last hour and a bit, there's so much more to you, and I feel like that was almost just a really lazy or bad question. So how do you hope your kids describe you?
It's someone who's, I think what I'm trying to instill in my kids is don't be afraid to make mistakes, because mistakes are where the gold is. I was so risk averse in coming up. I never wanted to let anyone down. I never wanted to fail. If I didn't think I could nail it, I wouldn't do it, which is a terrible attitude, because you end up missing out on all these wonderful things because I'm either going to be awesome at it or forget about it. I'll do something else. So I want them to kind of embrace the failures, because failures are a beautiful gift. It's either it's a dead end that stops you wasting any time going further down that road, or it redirects you into another beautiful area that you never expected, right? So I used to be so ashamed of failure, whereas now I know the beauty that's in it. And I think if I wish I had embraced that earlier, because I think life would have been a bit more enjoyable.
I can't wait till I can embrace that. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because that incessant perfectionism of wanting to be perfect is a terrible way to live. It's given me an incredible life, but it's a painful, lonely.
There's a big cost, yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, Grant.
Thank you so much for first of all, for joining us, but your generosity in sharing your story with so much heart. You are so lovable.
Yeah.
You really are.
It was I'm sorry I wasn't funnier. I told myself I'd go in there and be funny. And none of that happened, and I cried twice.
We'll put a laugh track on afterwards.
Just underneath the crying bit. So it makes no sense whatsoever.
Just to lift the mood, it's a bit dark,
That's that's exactly what I'm going through my mind now, going, I think that was a bit heavy.
I think it's way more powerful than any laughs that you would otherwise bring.
Well, if I can, just to really validate what you've just done, that will help so many people.
Yeah.
It's just going to be, anyone in the media currently or who wants to get into that, or in any line of work really where you've set yourself relentlessly on a task or find yourself doing it for someone else's validation, that is going to be you will help so many people, mate. And I think, I mean, you've been making people laugh around Australia for the last, 20 years. So it's okay if
Just make them cry this time.
Yeah, there's one time. No, we love you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Grant.
It was a really beautiful experience. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Stand on the corner, hang in the moonlight. You came to
Well, there he is, Grant Denyer, someone that I think we all thought we knew. I think everyone thought, I would say, most people thought if you say Grant Denyer, it's like, oh yeah, I know Grant Denyer. But after that, I'm like, oh wow, I'm not going to pretend like I know anyone ever again unless I hear them talk about what they have actually gone through. That is astonishing. I mean, that story of him, particularly his time where he was struggling with the painkiller meds, with the OxyContin. God, I mean, I've since that actually encouraged me to watch this Netflix show Painkiller with Matthew Broderick, which is about the birth of OxyContin, and it is horrific, that story. And now having seen that show and knowing that he went through that it's heartbreaking, but a miracle, a real miracle that he's gotten through it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit. Not so much the OxyContin part, but just like to be really honest. And Grant might listen to this bit, and it's certainly not meant to offend or upset him. But when it was suggested that Grant Denyer would come on the podcast, I thought, what, the zany weather guy? Like, why are we getting the funny weatherman? That's not like, this is not quite, I don't see how.
Yeah, you always said you don't want weathermen on this podcast. That was your one thing.
No, I that was my first thought. I was like, well, yeah, he does Family Feud, and I think he's just a bit of a funny, silly guy. I don't think that's quite what we're. But as soon as he started speaking, I was distracted by the thought that I kept saying to myself, God, you're so judgmental. Like, for someone who should know better, and for someone who wouldn't describe himself as being
You
judgmental.
mean you personally?
Yeah, me. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was saying
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's me talking to myself.
Okay.
I wasn't saying that to Grant Denyer.
The irony.
I was thinking, Hugh, you are really judgmental. Like, you don't, and I kept, the more and more he went on, the more and more I was thinking, I feel so terrible. And my first thought was, rather than, oh yeah, what's his story? What else has he done? What else has happened in his life? I was just thinking, I don't think this is quite the place. And so it just got me thinking a lot about judgmental and why we're so judgmental. But then also, I think more helpful is how, if you feel like you're quite a judgmental person as well, which I think a lot of us are. And I think it's like a self-protective type thing. Like, it's a self-defense. It's like a defense, not a self-defense. It's a defense mechanism. Really, we can sort of make judgments on other people so that we feel more safe and secure and better about ourselves, and probably comes from the insecurity we have. But I was just thinking a lot about this whole thing about how judgmental we are, how often we are, like how quick we are to judge other people. And there were just two things I was thinking about, which I think are really helpful for people if they're trying to, if like me, you're thinking, I can be a bit judgmental at times. And the first one I thought about was a very simple one of just differentiating between someone's actions and the person they are, or their behaviours and the actual person. Because really I was sort of judging his behaviours, like the way he is, and not in a bad way, I very much pigeonholed him as a guy who does the weather in a funny way.
And that's all he is.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was, for some reason, and for all the work I've done in this area and for all the incredible people we've chatted to, I still led to that of like, oh yeah. I didn't roll my eyes. I was like, oh yeah, the funny weather guy.
But we can only know the version of someone that they put out there, I guess.
That's very true. And that sort of leads to my second point, as far as the second thing I think is really helpful. Well, the first thing to do, I think, is just like, are you judging the person or their behaviours? And if it's the behaviours, then you probably don't know the whole picture. I think the second thing you could do is you could picture the person as like a pie chart and actually draw like in your head mentally. You don't need to actually do this, but just draw a little.
Obviously a pie chart with legs and arms and stuff like that. Not just a rolling person.
But if you were to just draw a pie chart of someone, you pick anyone that you think you judge a bit, particularly a famous person, and just actually be honest, how much of this person do I really know about? Like, how much do I really know of their whole life, their whole journey, their personality, their family, their life, what it's like to be them. How much do I really know? And if you look at it as a pie chart, it would be this, what I knew about Grant Denyer and his whole life. It is the smallest, like him, what he does on TV. It is such a small little slice.
And even having spent that hour and a half with him, it's still so small.
It almost becomes smaller and smoother. Like the more you talk to someone, the smaller and smaller that piece of that pie in the pie chart comes.
Yeah.
And you realize like you are judging such a small seed. And it's almost, in fact, that's exactly how I felt. The more and more I got to know him, the more and more we listened to him, the more I realized I knew nothing about this man.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about, and it almost made me feel like more of an arsehole. Like I don't know what it's like to have your parents separate when you're 11 or 12 years old, and the path that sets you on when your dad then moves interstate, and you feel like that you're the reason that happened. The trajectory that he goes on to, compared, for example, the trajectory that we went on with two parents who, love each other, still do. We're so lucky to have that. And it didn't set us on this chart of, am I lovable? I need to impress people. I need to win people's love. We didn't have to do that. But here I am judging such a small, but now I know that's part of his like story and his chart. There's just so much about people we don't know, yet the judgments we make are based on such a small amount. And the other thing you can probably do is just have a think about a time in your life where you felt judged and how awful that feeling is. I had it myself at my 25-year school reunion. Someone made a comment about purely on what they've heard from me in like a public setting as opposed to the person I really am. And it made me feel so shit. Like it really did make me feel so flat. I was like, that's just based on you've taken such a small, so just reminding yourself what it feels like to be judged as well. I think those three things can be really helpful because I think the less judgment in this world, the better this world will be. And especially with social media, we're so quick to make judgments now, especially if we're going to base our judgment on someone's social media account. We all know people in our lives that we love dearly, but we see their social media and think that's not really, well, there's a reason they're posting the stuff they're posting. We don't quite get it. And we need to just stop judging and let people just live their life and be a little bit more empathetic to their journey, I think.
I agree. But I also think, and I also think we negate the cost it has on yourself when you're judging. Because like if I look through social media or whatever, or something like that and I've been guilty of this in the past of like just really, as Soph would know better than anyone, of like seeing someone on Instagram or something and seeing what they're doing in these photos that are putting up, which are pretty hard to handle. And I'll get into a bit of a spiral about how bad this person looks. And all that does is make me angry about the world and make me feel shit and make me, and I hate the person I become because I'm having an internal pile on about someone or something or a group of people or something like that. And it's an awful thing to do to them, but it also only just makes me feel worse and me more angry and me a worse version of myself, as opposed to trying to see the whole person and do some of the things you were saying before. It's just a lighter load to carry.
Yeah, it is. And I also think like Grant's a perfect example. If you're looking at, not that I've never done this with Grant Denyer, but like if you're judging what he puts up on social media, on Instagram, knowing that this is a man who just feels like he's unlovable might suggest, this is hypothetically, I haven't made this judgment on his social media, but might describe why, for example, he puts up certain pictures. It's like he just doesn't feel lovable and he wants to feel that love from people out there. So it'd explain, it's such basic stuff and what we teach kids in schools about putting yourself in someone else's shoes rather than just being so quick to judge their behaviours.
I remember seeing a video on Vice's New Music Corner, I think it was called, where they'd get musicians in and they play them music in their ears and they've got in headphones and they're not told what it is and they have to just tell them what they think of the song and then they'll find out who the band is afterwards. And I think they were trying to stitch up Nickelback because that's like everyone's pet for like 15 years on the
punching
internet.
bag,
to the Killers. And they played something, I think it was Nickelback, to the Killers, and they were listening to it and one of them was like, is that Nickelback? And they're like, yeah, expecting them to pile on. And they were like, say what you want about them, but they are the nicest people you'll ever meet in music. And they just talked about what lovely people they were. And I remember being shocked and also so pleasantly surprised. And it made me my respect for the Killers go up as well. So I'm like, they're above the pylon and willing to see the people, regardless of the fact that I'm sure that they don't have similar musical interests or tastes there.
Yeah. It's like when I hear, if I hear someone who's like a grown up adult man say that they like Taylor Swift and I go, and my initial instinct is like the weird judgmental voice in my head going like, oh, you can't. No,
You're not
you can't. Let's CAN apostrophe T. But then I catch myself.
Oh God. Yeah.
I catch myself and I go like, that is ridiculous. Don't judge this person just because they like Taylor Swift. You're allowed to. It's just music. Who
Yeah.
cares? But I also want to say, in just what you said, Josh, in that chat with Grant, you are one of the most lovable people I have ever met in my life.
Oh,
And I say that from myself, but also I know for a fact on behalf of everyone that listens to this podcast and everyone that knows you, you are the most lovable person you could ever want in your life.
Well, thank you.
And the night that I met you, like I know that like when you and I caught up and you brought Josh along at the pub that was like years ago and you're like, I'm going to bring Josh. And so I met you for the first time and just even though I know you're a bit dusty from the
festival.
from a festival.
Yeah, it wasn't putting my best foot forward.
But it's just like anyone that meets you, anyone that knows you and has met you will know this and will agree with me. But it's just like the energy that you have and that you carry and the way that you are around people is really very special. And I just wanted to say it on here. I could tell you in private as well, but it'd be a bit more awkward. But to say it here, I just want to make it so clear to you. And I know the voices pop up.
Yeah.
But
I'm trying to internally just bat them off.
yeah, I know you can try and disagree with me.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you are outvoted. The world has spoken. But yeah, it's just important that I say that and that you know that you are objectively a very, very lovable person.
Thank you. That's really kind. I think I said it right in the app, but I absolutely know I feel loved and lovable in the context of my family. But yeah, I feel like I'm just starting to change, but feels like it's taken like 36 years, so my entire life, to believe that people when they meet me would not be, it's not so much unlikable, but just kind of forgettable.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of uninteresting and why I got plenty of friends, don't need him, sort of thing.
Well, I can add interesting and likable to the list.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, but I guess that's just a caveat to, I don't know why I'm putting a caveat in there, but yeah. Thank you, though.
Because it felt weird to just say thanks.
I think so. I had to wrap it on and...
We're going to edit out all that and just have Ryan's comment.
It's like the first positive stitch up.
Got him.
Got him. Made him look better than he is.
Thank you. That's really kind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a beautiful comment, Ryan. Very good. This has been The Imperfects. I'm Hugh Van Cuylenberg. I've been joined by Ryan Shelton, Josh Van Cuylenberg. Please tune in next week where we get into another episode of The Imperfects.
And stick around for Stop Everything.
What?
And thank you, Grant, Denya, so much.
Incredible.
Hear the echo down the hall, like you were never there at all. Just leave me down here.